Okay. Yep. All right. Welcome everybody to the Crash and Church show. I'm Crash with Church here, talking this week post Hurricane Nicole, post Hurricane the not red wave of the Republican Party.
Not the red hurricane.
Not the red hurricane.
Florida
and
flooded,
anything.
but that's it.
Yeah, Florida flooded, houses collapsed.
But the Democrat Party did not collapse.
Yeah. Democrat Party didn't collapse, unfortunately. They're still pretty strong.
Yeah, it's a little discouraging in some ways. In a lot of ways, it's fine. You know, as long as we take the House, you know, as long as we have the House, which we'll probably will, then we can stop that. That'll stop the extreme agenda stuff from continuing. It'd be nice to have the Senate as well, but some of the commentary I've seen suggests that if we have the House and the Senate, then come the next election, 2024, then there's more to blame Republicans for. And so
I saw the same thing.
Yeah, kind of puts us in a better position for 2024, I guess. But that's not really related to my feelings on it. Like I feel discouraged because what I really wanted was a referendum on all the craziness. You know, all the woke stuff and the extreme, the economy and those things, you know, the border and all this terrible stuff that's happened since Biden came into office. I wanted a referendum on that, basically, that the people were saying, hey, we don't like this. Let's not do this. And instead, the message was half the country apparently loves it and is happy with the crime and the border and the, you know, trans and the kids and all that kind of stuff. And it's just discouraging to me. It says to me that we're worse off as a country than I hope. Because, you know, you like to think that it's just the fringe woke people that are the crazies, you know, or whatever. But apparently it's half the country.
Well, I think that there's a scenario that we could look at as the possibility for it. Well, several scenarios. But I think if you remember back Tuesday night when we started talking to each other after the polls started closing, I said I didn't expect that it was going to be a red wave.
Right.
And
I did. It surprised me that we.
Yeah, I wished that it would have been, but I don't think it, you know, I just didn't think it would. And I think the reason why.
Because you're already pessimistic.
I'm already pessimistic because we have an election behind us where there were absolute nefarious things that were going on, really shady, questionable things that were going on. And then you have a situation like early voting. You brought up early voting. And in early voting, Republicans tend to not vote early. They typically will vote within just a few days
if the polls start opening. Yeah.
No, but the Democrats do, and the Democrats always choose their candidates very early. If it comes down to a Republican and a Democrat 2 months prior to the election, they will choose the Democrat, and they won't wait for the.
Yeah, we talked about the Fetterman Oz debate.
Yeah, and I think that, well, and 70% of the Fetterman votes from the Democrats came from early voting.
Prior to that debate.
This is all prior to the debate. And
I don't know if it would have made the difference, though.
I think it could have made enough of a difference to make up the difference in the percentage. I don't think I don't think we're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands of votes, but I think it's quite possible that it could have changed. But something else I was looking at today as well is if you look at the results of each of these races, I went to the Fox News website and I just clicked on the Senate race, for example, and I went to the key states that Fox News decided they were going to show. They don't show all of the states that had senators running, but they showed key states, and in most of them, there were several candidates listed, and these other candidates listed were like 1%, less than 1%. And in
Less than 1%. What?
less than 1%, they received less than
Or
1%,
received?
or they
Yeah, just of
received,
the total vote.
yeah, yeah, between, yep, and between 1 to 2%. And when you add those up, you get the difference. If those would had gone to, let's say, Mehmet Oz, you would have seen the election totally the
Right.
other way
So a
around. The
split
same
vote,
thing,
sort of.
split vote, and the same thing happened in Georgia. If the other candidate, and it was only a third party candidate, if the other candidate had not run or decided, hey, this is not going to come down between me and the other guy, this is going to come, or I'm not going to take away any of these votes, really. It's coming down to the two big names in this. I'm going to pull out. I'm going to make sure that my name is not on the ballot. Give the people the choice of only two people. And when you do that, when you run a third party candidate, period, you vote the Democrat into office. And that's what happened in Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, the next greatest number of votes went down to a selection that was not a person on the ballot. It went to a selection on the ballot that said neither of these candidates. So instead of voting for a candidate, Pennsylvania had the option to vote none of them.
None of the above.
None of the above. And
Just,
they had just
Brewster's
under
Millions.
they had just under 2 million, or 2% of the vote. And when you look at that and you combine the others that were on the ballot, it would have swung the vote to Mehmet Oz. And I think that that's really one of the big issues too, is we have these situations like in 1996 when Ross Perot ran, or I'm sorry, 1992 when Ross Perot ran. He took away the vote from George H.W. Bush, and we got Bill Clinton. And as bad as I think the Bushes are now, I think we can all look back and say that we would have been much better off having George H.W. Bush.
Yeah. There's pretty much anytime there's a Democrat in office, they like to ruin things a bit. So.
Yeah. So we do have cases in the country where you had that happening, but then you see something like what I showed you today out of Montana. And that was in Montana, the legislature, the Republicans in the state legislature, presented a bill that would have made it illegal to allow a born child to die on the table after birth. And this would have come down to whether or not they botched the abortion, or whether or not this child was born under any other circumstances, and they decide to just let it die. It would have banned that from happening in the state of Montana, and 51% of the people voted to not do that, to allow
the child
to not
to
save the child, to allow Montana to voted yes to allow Montanans to let the baby die on the table. And I think we're seeing a big shift in the country where people are, they're shifting away from morality fast. And it's pretty sad.
That's the discouragement I was talking about, where it just feels like, I don't know what it is, but it's like the whole, sexualizing of children thing, where you think it's just the kooks that want to, it's the people who are sexually immoral, that are trying to push their agenda to normalize sexual immorality. And it's a fringe group that's doing that, basically. But it's bled into the culture deeper than that, apparently. And it's more than that. People that legitimately believe that it's appropriate and good to be teaching sexuality and things to 5-6-year-olds, and stuff.
Yeah. And see, that makes me angry. That type of thing makes me very, very angry. When I read the article about what was happening in Montana, I almost came to tears. I got pretty emotional, and it's because children are such precious things. Newborn children are so absolutely precious, and you obviously have been able to experience that rather recently. And the emotion that you get when you have a child like that. I remember there was it wasn't the show Cops. It was another show, but they were showing a guy who had walked out into a pond and he had an infant child with him. And he was basically holding this child hostage so that the police wouldn't harm him. And the pond was surrounded. The police were trying to get to him and keep him from drowning the child. And he was making all kinds of threats. Was wanted from police or by police. He had attacked his wife and stole the baby from his wife or ex-wife or whatever it was. And he resorted to something that was absolutely evil. But he was taking this child out in this pond, and finally the police got this guy to give the baby up, and they of course arrested the guy. And the police officer that rescued the baby, that was first able to take this baby from the man, he got the baby back to shore. He handed it to the paramedics, and he completely broke down. He was extremely emotional. He was crying because to him, obviously, you could tell he was a father. And I think it's very difficult to have those kinds of emotions unless you have been a parent and you absolutely love your children, would do anything for your children.
Well, I don't know that it's difficult to have those emotions. Like it's always been sort of the default emotion. Like we protect children and we find children precious. That's been a societal norm forever. Like children are precious. And what they've
I never
done,
got emotional about it until I had a child who I really, really care for.
well, you would in that situation, I bet, though. If you were in a
I
situation
think
where you
that's
had to
probably
save a
true.
child, but
Yeah,
what we've done is we've taken it and they've dehumanized children in the womb to make it so that people can shut off that emotion
yeah, it's
because
women's health.
they think of it
It's
as not a child.
they think of it
And
as women's health
um,
that they don't. Yeah,
and that's expanding, and they're shutting off the motion further and further and further. You think of it as past feeling, right?
well, this what's happening in our society when you look at things like the Democrats calling crimes that are committed against others with the use of a gun, they call it gun crimes. Because when you call it gun crimes, you now take the humans out of the situation and now you make the gun evil. And the guns aren't evil. The guns don't commit crimes all by themselves, but they call them gun crimes. And they do that, again, just because they want you to go after the gun. They want you to think of the gun as the perpetrator of the crime and not the person. And it's really unfortunate the allowing people to get out of jail, allowing people to not go to jail or letting them out without bail. People who commit very serious violent crimes are now being let out of jail and not charged with crimes. They're not even released with bail. It's we're just seeing a big shift in our society, I think, and it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I do think that concept of past feeling, which is in our faith, there's scripture on that, right? I'm not sure if there's biblical. There probably is. There's probably a biblical scripture as well that talks about people being past feeling. But since I don't know exactly where the scripture comes from, I can't say whether it's from the Bible or from the Book of Mormon or other scriptures. But I think that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing people they're shutting off legitimate feeling and for the sake of self, for the sake of self-interest and justifying their desire for immorality, that they're shutting off their feelings about things that are wholesome and good. And
Yeah. Well, the
yeah,
Spirit of the Lord
it's going to kill society.
yeah, the Spirit of the Lord is ceasing to be with
Well,
people and a large number of people. It used to be that it was a small number. When you would see people, someone like Charles Manson and his followers in the late 60s, um, you would see them for what they were. They were very evil, horrible people. And yet that the number of people who are now like that exist everywhere. Anybody who shouts uh, that you should celebrate abortion, that you should praise your abortion and celebrate it, is just as bad as Charles Manson and his followers, in my opinion. And you see this number that's happening. And yet, when Charlie Manson did all of those things, people resoundingly rejected him, resoundingly rejected the idea that people would do that and think it was okay. And everybody recognized that it was very, very evil. But now we're in this situation where very, very evil people are being released from prison. They're not being charged with crimes, and they're having that happen from very, very evil people. So very evil people are letting the very evil people out.
Not directly related, but kind of a Charles Manson point of interest is that the concept that Charles Manson had and his group was race wars. They were trying to, when they committed those murders, they were trying to start race wars.
Yes,
and,
they were.
10 years ago, maybe not 10, but 20 years ago at least, in the 90s, early 2000s, we'd moved so far past the idea of race wars. We'd moved past, like, it was such a dated concept back then. And now it's been driven back into the common thinking, and that there's this terrible racism and this animosity between the races, and it's been driven by the Democratic Party entirely. And
yes, it has.
It's really unfortunate, where we could actually see race wars happen.
Well, and it started again
Terrible.
in the 2000. It started again by Al Gore in the 2000 election. That's when
you don't blame Obama fully.
Yeah, well, no, because even Bill Clinton did it in 1996, and his wife did it in 1996, and then it was ratcheted up just a little tiny bit in 2000, and then a little bit more in 2002. Even though that jump from 2000 to 2004 was large, but it's nothing compared to what it is today, because Obama then did it, and Obama didn't just do it in 2008, but he did it throughout his entire presidency.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just election time that he did it. He did it throughout his presidency. And then, of course, it got worse and worse and worse.
It's so strange that that's the case. And it was totally done for power and for politics, to ripping the country apart for that. The fact that we elected, as a country, a black man to be our president should have said everything. It should have been the end of it.
And it was overwhelmingly voted for him.
Overwhelmingly, yeah. And even people who didn't like him and didn't vote for him still, like, me, for example, I'm one. I didn't vote for Obama. I didn't like him as a president. Like, even if I did like him as a person, as a president,
I saw through him. I saw through him.
But yeah, right. But even if I hadn't, I wouldn't have voted for him because he's Democrat. I'm just not going to vote for a Democrat. But and
yet many Republicans did vote for him because of hope and change.
But even though I wouldn't vote for him, didn't vote for him, I still appreciated the fact that we had elected a black man. I mean, it really did have meaning, even for everyone, except the very, very extremist, white supremacist.
A half black man, a half white, half black man.
Yeah, but essentially a black man. We had.
Well, that's how he was. That's how he was sold to the American people, even though he was raised by a white person, by a white woman.
Right, but that's beyond my point. My point is it should have ended racism. It showed that we weren't a racist country.
Should have absolutely embodied the idea that we have completely moved past race.
Past it, yeah.
And yet, when he became president, he made it.
He stirred it up and stirred it up and stirred it up and stirred it up, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And it's just terrible. It's really unfortunate. And like I said, it's just for politics. I don't think Obama or I think there are some Democrats who are truly, legitimately, consciously evil, right? But for the most part, they're just evil in that in the same way Republicans are evil in that they want power, and they use whatever means they can to gain power, and they don't care about the actual effect that it has on the country. And unfortunately, that's true for most Republicans too. Like that, what they care about is power and getting their own way and making money and maintaining that power, maintaining their system, and they'll sell the country out for that on both sides of the aisle. And it's I don't know. I mean,
I think
Satan's hands are in the world, right?
well, and I think that you could say that about members of the Republican Party as well, like Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They are absolutely just as bad. Lindsey Graham's just as bad. Lindsey Graham has good
He
moments,
has good moments. Well, Mitch
but
McConnell does every now and again too. Yeah,
yeah, but they are farly outweighed by his lust for power. And I think that when you do have somebody like Joe Manchin or Tulsi Gabbard who speak out against their party, they're really vilified. And Joe Manchin, really went full blown at the president this just a couple of days ago when the president was talking about ending all fossil fuels and getting rid of coal, getting rid of natural gas. And Joe Manchin flat out said that is so out of touch with the American people, that is so out of touch with where we
reality.
should be. And he really blasted the president for it. And it wasn't a thing where he was saying, "Hey, I'm saying these things because I'm in a coal state." He said those things, you could tell, because he believes what he said, that fossil fuels absolutely must stay. They are the backbone of our country, and he will destroy the country because of it.
Yeah.
And when you see stuff like that, and I think you're seeing some of that really right now. Today, you and I talked about the things that Donald Trump is now saying against Ron DeSantis and against John Youngkin or Glenn Youngkin. Sorry, the governor of Virginia, who won overwhelmingly a year ago because of the woke policies that they were trying to put into place there. But yet he felt for some reason that he was going to go after Glenn Youngkin. And I think it's really because
he more went after
DeSantis, but he didn't have flattering things to say about Youngkin. And really what's so sad about it is you're now seeing the unhinged bad side of Trump, where he can't keep his mouth closed, and for some reason he's taking their wins.
What I replied to you before was what Trump's going to Trump,
Well, no, I don't think it's just what Trump's going to Trump. I think it's more with where he feels like his position is now threatened, because all of the commentary the last couple of days that is Trump. But I mean, but to say Trump is going to do what Trump is going to do, anybody can do that. But what I'm saying is, for him in particular, he should be looking at this as an opportunity to really strengthen the country. Trump can go out and he can say, "Look, do you see what happened in Florida? Do you see what's happening in Virginia? Now, do you want to see that they're all over the country? Because if you want to see that all over the country, you make sure that they are able to stay in power in their states, and you elect me as president, because that's what we're going to do in the country."
Well, my point
if he said that,
I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. He should do that. But my point is simply that he's never done that. Trump has always been petty.
He goes after, he is petty, and he goes after people who are good people. And in 1996, or sorry, in 2016, it worked, because he went after Ted Cruz, because not a lot of people knew about Ted Cruz. Not a lot of people knew about Marco Rubio. So when he called him Little Marco and Lying Ted, it was really easy for people to get behind Trump because they knew Donald Trump. They had seen Donald Trump for a long time. Well, now people have seen Ron DeSantis for a long time, and they're not happy. They are not happy with what
And
Donald
I've
Trump
heard
is saying.
commentary that people believe that a lot of people believe that it won't hurt Trump and that
No.
Trump's base is
Yeah.
too strong. But I think that's a mistaken thought, because
It is mistaken.
Trump does
Because
have a strong base. There's no question. But there's a whole bunch of people who like Trump because there's no better option. And then
but there,
you and
there
I
was
fall into that. Like you and I like Trump because there's no better option. He's going to lose.
Well, we
those
definitely
people.
felt that way, and we definitely felt that way in 2020. There definitely wasn't a better option, but we also had his record to run on. However, his last year in office was absolutely horrible.
Awful. Yeah.
It was horrible, and it was horrible because of him.
Well, and did you see the stuff that happened with
he
Candace
made the bad
Owens?
decisions?
So Candace Owens interviewed Trump, and she asked him about the vaccines, and Trump touted them, and talked about how awesome it was and how great they were. And
when was this?
Just recently. She was talking about it. I think it was either today or yesterday on her podcast. I don't know when the interview was though, but it wasn't too long before that. And so Trump's base, all these people came out and were mad as heck because Trump's base, by and large, is not for the vaccine.
Yep.
And so they were mad at Trump. And then Trump, his response was he got extremely mad at Candace Owens and yelled at her and cussed her up one side and down the other. And it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good, and when he's out of touch with his base, he's out of touch with what the people who love Trump actually like about him, and starts pushing things that they don't like. Even though he may maintain a certain level of loyalty, there's still Trump can easily drive people away because he's such a petty guy, and we put up with the pettiness because of all the good that he did and the goodness that we felt he was fighting the good fight despite his weaknesses, the pettiness being one of his primary weaknesses. And so when we feel like, I think you and I both feel this way, he started failing in his last year, and he failed in the 2 years since then. He stayed focused on the wrong things, even though you and I kind of, I don't want to be too explicit about our views on it because we'll get, in trouble on YouTube. But we're not exactly against Trump's reasonings, on what he thinks about the election and stuff, to put a not too fine a point on it. But he's just so doggedly focused on that to the exclusion of what's actually good. And he actually lost us the Senate.
I believe that.
We would have the Senate if it wasn't for Trump. He was so petty that he actually told his voters to not go out and vote. And so we ended up losing the Senate because of it. And that's not a good look,
He is his own worst enemy by far, because he opens his mouth, he says things without thinking, and the problem
the way
that
he's
facing
is off.
Right. His thinking is way off because he's making this about him. That we just have the most popular governor in the United States is Ron DeSantis, and Trump knows that. And so now, because he sees that, he feels like he's got to knock the number one guy off. And whatever lead he may have had over DeSantis in different polls in other states, I think he's going to lose it. And I think that especially if he goes after Carrie Lake, if she wins, he will lose it. Now, she has said flattering things about Trump. At least she has said, well, I think what she said more than anything, though, is that
Trump. Sorry.
No, she's just said that the election is questionable.
Yeah. I think what it is, she's pro Make America Great again.
Yes, and yet Trump is thinking that Make America Great Again is Trump, and that's not it. People want America to be great again. Just because he came up with the slogan, or his people came up with the slogan, doesn't make it Trump. It makes it how people feel.
Right.
And people feel like they want to have.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We want to make America great again. And Ron DeSantis's thing is keep Florida free. It's
Now,
make Florida free, keep Florida free.
right. And one of the things I've heard too about Trump and DeSantis is that DeSantis doesn't do well on the debating and the politicking and the running for office. He does great at governing, but he runs badly. And I think historically that has been true when he ran and debated in the past, that he struggled, and he didn't do really great on stage. But one of the things that I think these people who are saying that basically their point is Trump will destroy him when they debate. And I think they're missing the reality that he's found his footing. DeSantis has found his footing. He's worked with the press
in
enough.
The debate stage. I think what he did against Charlie Crist in the debate, he destroyed Charlie Crist.
He's
in those
really
debates.
good now, and I think he would.
Yeah.
I think he would really actually. You never know, but I think Trump would stand up and do his Trump stuff, which is it's a good style as far as cutting down your enemy and that sort of stuff. But if you have the wrong person standing up against it, which Trump just hasn't had because people in politics are generally terrible. But if you have the right person stand up against it and point out the garbage and speak the truth and point to the record, and DeSantis has such an easy job. He just has to point.
He does.
All he has to do is say, "Look, you were great. You were great, but you dropped the ball.
You were great
for
3 years. You were great for 3 years.
You dropped the ball. The last year,
and then you handed the country over to Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, that was it. It was that, and we didn't make that up just so we don't look like we're totally plagiarizing. But I cannot remember who it was that said that when I commented to you. It was probably someone from the Daily Wire, because that's the primary people I follow. But yeah, the simple approach is just to say, you handed the country over to Anthony Fauci, and he did. There's just no question he did that.
Nope.
And that just wins the debate for and you could say
not only did he
you couldn't finish the wall. You couldn't even finish the wall,
You couldn't even finish the wall. But you could, and definitely to say you also came out with a vaccine that has been pushed upon the American people and they've lost their jobs. And he could just go through the list of all of the negative things that have happened because of the vaccine, and it would rally the base, the Republican base around Ron DeSantis, because he would be saying what not only he believes, because he has said it over and over and over again, but he would also say what everybody else is feeling. And when Ron DeSantis said we're opening up Florida, he did it when Trump was still in office. And he could say, look, Mr. President, you didn't do the job. I did the job. Right. And I made Florida free because you weren't going to do your job. And you allowed these things to happen under your watch, and you knew that they were bad decisions. And he could go through and say how he knew that they were bad decisions. But you gave up your authority.
One of the other really big things that Trump did not do, it's a huge issue. And I think the reason he didn't do it is because he didn't understand it. And I don't know if Ron DeSantis does or not, but that is dealing with Section 230, dealing with the problem of social media and the censorship. That is something that Trump dropped the ball on. I don't think Trump even understood it, because Trump came out with one comment, Twitter, where he said, repeal Section 230, which is so not the solution. Like we want Section 230 in place. Section 230 is important and meaningful.
And then he was censored and kicked off of Twitter.
The problem with Section 230 is that these social media companies are protected by Section 230, but then they're not acting like public utilities. They're acting like publishers, like editors, and they're censoring. And so they're basically taken from both sides of the coffer, or however the phrase is, whatever the phrase is, drinking from both sides of the cup. There's a phrase out there that means what I'm trying to say, but I can't come up with it. They're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. No, that's not it.
The problem with Trump is that he wants to be liked by everybody, and when he's not liked by everybody, that's when he lashes out. But he wants to be loved by the press. He hated the press not because they called him out on things. He hated them because they didn't make him look good, and because he wanted to be loved by them. Look, Megyn Kelly has been vilified completely unjustifiably because she asked Donald Trump tough questions in the 2016 debates. She was supposed to do that. That was her job. Actually, it was in 2015 when she started doing it. But that was her job to do that. And she wanted to make sure that the tough questions were being asked. And as a journalist, you absolutely should make the person feel uncomfortable. But she was vilified so horribly by Donald Trump. And then the people came out with pitchforks and torches after Megyn Kelly. And she was driven from the media, and she was driven away from her place. And yet she did exactly what she should have done.
She's one of
But
the
that's
ones.
what
She's one of the ones who doesn't believe Trump can lose. She just shouldn't think Ron DeSantis has a shot in heck. Like
I think she would change her mind after this week. I would have I don't watch her podcast all the time, so I don't know.
I don't know.
But I think that when you do that, you are he didn't alienate a lot of people because of that. He had a lot of people rally behind him. And it was funny because
we talked about Trump when he attacked Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, because she was asking tough questions. They didn't like it. And yet they made fun of Saturday Night Live made fun of the media when they would lob softball questions at Barack Obama and ask really tough questions at Hillary Clinton. No, but Hillary Clinton. This was 2008. And It came down to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and they lobbed softball questions at them. And so Saturday Night Live, they go out and they totally make fun of the media for doing what they did because they could see the bias. And the Republicans were like, "What are you doing? Why are you giving this guy such easy questions?" And so they hated it. They wanted the tough questions to be asked, but then when the tough questions were asked from, of Donald Trump, the Republicans that rallied behind him acted exactly the way the media acted with Barack Obama. They thought it was unfair, and it was hypocritical. It was absolutely hypocritical. They should have allowed the tough questions to happen. They should have allowed the best person to win that race on merit, not on whether or not you're going to give them easy questions.
Right. Well, I think it'll be interesting. And I do think you and I are of like minds on our DeSantis fandom. I actually kind of hope DeSantis straight up runs against Trump in the primary. And I think there's a good shot that he could beat him. I know that's not an easy, it's not like an easy.
Well, and I don't want to see it. And for me, it's a double-edged sword because I don't want DeSantis to run in 24.
You don't want to lose him.
I want to see him finish. I want to see him finish here. Now, I think he could have a team in place well enough that it would be fine.
Sure.
And of course, his lieutenant governor.
Well, and I think he'd leave behind the governance. But for two things, he'd leave behind the governance, which is what you said. But then the other thing too is he's leaving behind a red state. So whoever runs the next time, the chances of it staying red is very, very high, unless you get a terrible candidate in there. And so,
well, look what happened in Utah after John Huntsman Jr. went and became ambassador to China. You had a guy that Utahns didn't know very well, but because he was his lieutenant governor, he became governor, and then they reelected Gary Herbert 3 or 4 more times. And so the guy was in office for over, 12 years. And that's because it's because the people were very happy with the state being run the way that it was being run. And Utah was not as bad off as the rest of the country during the 2008 real estate market collapse. They did have bad things happen, but because they had prepared themselves as well as they didn't feel the effects that most of the country felt. like Florida back then. Florida felt it almost as worse than anybody else. I think Nevada was number one in the real estate problem, but Florida definitely felt it. And but you have that possibility. But I do think though that if DeSantis was to run, if Trump keeps this up, he will lose his base. DeSantis just has to go over, go after him on the things that we talked about. And I don't see how Trump loses that or wins that against that, because everybody saw what Donald Trump did in 2020. The entire country saw what he did.
I think people are really underestimating how much people like Ron DeSantis. I mean, even
I agree.
In the Daily Wire on their election night, they went around and Candace had actually asked everyone who'd they choose. Would you choose DeSantis or Trump? And everybody but one of them, everybody but Michael Knowles, just straight up was like DeSantis, easy. And I think that's representative of the way that a lot of Republicans feel. Like I think if you went out and you polled Republicans and you legitimately could poll all Republicans, you'd get a lot more thinking DeSantis is a better choice than Trump than you think. But I think there is a hardcore Trump base, though, that he wouldn't lose. That would make it still a really tough fight. So,
I think it would be, but I think but in this case, you just have to get past the primary. You don't have to worry about a general election. The general election, the Republicans will back Trump. Period. They will back Trump against Joe Biden.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely, against Joe Biden. There's no doubt that everybody who is now really, really, really pissed off at Donald Trump for going after DeSantis and Youngkin, they will back Donald Trump if he becomes the nominee.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Because there is Biden. Absolutely no other choice.
As much as we've been ragging on Trump, Trump, if Trump gets in, does have another term.
I don't think he beats Joe Biden.
Well, but that aside, if he does beat Joe Biden, he has another term. I still expect Trump's going to fight the good fight and do good things for the country. I still think he's a good choice to be president. I believe that
to a point. Yeah. But he absolutely has to admit that what he did was wrong, because he's got the two things that really brought this country to its knees.
Trump
under the boot of the Democrats, and that is the vaccine and lockdowns, and all of that, and all of that has resulted in CRT, in wokeism coming full blown out. All of those things are happening because he didn't squash those things when he had a chance.
With Black Lives Matter and Derek Chauvin and George Floyd.
And he had a chance to stop it. He didn't, because he was afraid of the mob. That's really what happened. And we had mob rule in the country for the summer of 2020. So I do think that DeSantis could very well absolutely beat. The Blaze was the same way, by the way, as the Daily Wire. The Blaze was only, and it was just Jason Whitlock who said Donald Trump, and it was funny because he said this was his point. He said DeSantis hasn't run on the national stage. Now that I completely disagree with, because everything he did set the tone nationally for Republicans.
What happened with Whitlock and Michael Malice?
Oh. Michael Malice is a jerk, number one. Michael Malice he's an anarchist wiener, and he's quite a negative guy, but he's also got...
I want to throw out, just for my context here, that I agree with 95% of what Michael Malice thinks and says, but then he's got maybe only 90%. But most of what Michael Malice says, I actually agree with. But
I'm not at 95. I can tell you that.
But then he's got this other stuff where his anarchy stuff, and I agree in some ways. Like if you put his back against the wall, he gets pretty nasty pretty quickly, and I don't like that. Anyway, what happened?
Well, what happened was Jason Whitlock was talking about the evil that's in the country, something that we opened the show talking about, and how people celebrating abortion the way that they are now out in the streets, the way that they are uh, turning towards transgenderism, towards this whole drag queen stuff, all of these things. And he brought those examples up specifically. And he was talking about how bad the country is doing because of it. And Michael Malice said, "You're wrong." And he said, "You're wrong because the people just voted uh, resoundingly to stop all of that, and they didn't. And it was just early on in the night. The feeling was that the Republicans were going to get this red wave, maybe even a red tsunami. And this was early on in the evening, election night, Tuesday night. And Jason Whitlock was like, "What do you mean I'm wrong? You're not hearing what I'm talking about." And Michael Malice would not let him finish. He kept telling him, "You're wrong, and you're not listening to facts. You don't have the facts on your side." And Jason Whitlock was like, "What do you mean I'm wrong?" He says, "I'm telling you what I feel."
Yeah.
Jason Whitlock was saying, "I'm telling you how I feel. You're now telling me that I don't know what I feel." And he's saying, "Well, you don't have the facts on your side." And he's saying, this is my opinion. This is how I feel." And Whitlock just kept going after him. And
You mean Malice?
Finally, Malice went after Jason Whitlock. It kept going after him. And everybody in that room felt extremely uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable watching it. And Beck just stops him and goes, "Guys, what are we doing here? I mean, what in the world is going on?" And so Jason Whitlock left for a few minutes, and he wasn't asked to leave. He came back and he said, "Look, the reason why I left was because I was finding myself go to a place that I knew that I shouldn't go." He said, "As a Christian, I had to collect myself. I wanted to remind myself that I have these certain core beliefs,
Right.
that I should act a certain way as a Christian, and I wasn't going to come out here until then." And everybody defended Jason Whitlock's point, because what Jason Whitlock was talking about was very different than what Michael Malice was thinking he was talking about.
He was kind of almost strawmanning him.
He thought that Jason Whitlock was making a statement about the country. What Jason Whitlock was trying to say over and over was, no. This is how I feel the country is going. And so
the election proved him right.
The reflection proved him right. Now, Jason Whitlock was the only person in that room that was solidly for Trump. And when he said Trump has a record to run on, Steve Deace jumped right in and said, "Okay, you say that he has a record to run on, and that record is also the last year of his presidency, where he gave up his presidency." Yep, he gave up his presidency. And then he pushed a vaccine that has been provably inadequate to stop.
Not what it was said.
What it was billed for sure, but also provably not that it is inadequate against COVID, and that it has caused a lot of problems, not just physical problems where people have had negative reactions, but also the emotional and economic problems that the vaccine has caused, where people have lost their jobs.
And the loss of freedom thing is such a
big loss of freedom. And people
don't understand how big that is, and why people who stand against the mandate, like a lot of people, even like that got the vaccine and were pro-vaccine,
they were against having it pushed.
Stood against that mandate. That freedom is so precious to us.
Yeah, what they have done to military members, especially right before they retire and have the eligibility to receive full retirement and full benefits, throwing people out because they refuse to have the vaccine. These are people that gave so many of their years to the country and serving other people. And to treat them the way that they did, to treat the nurses who were once the great first responders on that first line of defense. They were absolutely considered. I'm not saying they were, but they were considered essential work. The essential workers. Everybody's an essential worker because you have somebody to take care of with the money that you make. But they turned completely against them then. And they lost their jobs. They were given ultimatums: you either the vaccine or you lose your job. And so they lost their jobs. They had to, or they quit. And just these are all very, very negative impacts from the vaccine and being pushed. And Donald Trump made that happen.
Yeah, definitely a big part of it for sure. So, do you think Star Wars can ever be good again? That was a segue, wasn't that elegant? Oh,
I think
elegant
I think
segue.
that if that I think that because Star Wars has it showed us a side that we never
I'm
wanted
talking
to
about
see
Reagan
because
Star Wars, just so we're clear. Just kidding.
That's a good one. Star Wars can never be good again, and
I think
for
it
one
can,
reason.
sure.
No, I don't think it can because Disney owns it.
Yeah, and that's the solution. And see, it can be good again. They just have someone
If you get it away from
has to
Disney,
get away
Disney
from
will
Disney.
never sell.
Yep,
Disney will never sell it. They will
exactly.
never sell it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. We'll see.
They've proven it with they've proven it with every series that they've done, every single one, and they've shown that, especially with Andor, that now they're really bad, and with it and it goes right in line with She-Hulk, and that is the direction of Disney. And they're going to put wokeism into everything.
I don't know if you can say anything.
They aren't going to rein it back. They aren't going to rein it back.
Well, I think you're right.
Yeah, but
on
you
that.
said,
I
but
think you're right on
your
that,
thing,
but...
yeah, your thing, if you remember, was that you had hope for them, and then because of Andor and because of all these other things they were doing, you're like,
well,
yeah, I have
Bob
no
Chapek.
hope for
Bob Chapek's latest statements that really crushed my hope into a bit.
Yeah, they just
But Bob Chapek won't be the
gone.
CEO forever.
He won't, but I think they're going to get somebody worse.
In the short term, you're absolutely right. There's no question about that. If they continue to lose money for another 10 years, you never know, right? So there's, for forever, like never improve, never change back from that. I don't know that I buy that. In the short term, though, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're absolutely right. And the problem is that, and I've said this before, I think that they're going to get better at their wokeism. Right now, they've made wokeism the priority. And so all they're doing is injecting wokeism at the expense of making great shows. And I think what they'll do is they'll learn how to make great shows with the wokeism still in them. And that combined with slowly making it so commonplace that people just accept it. Because that's what happens in entertainment, right? You inject these things that make people uncomfortable. They don't like it. But then pretty soon that sort of stuff's in every show. You can see it with like language, just with swearing and stuff, right? And now where people just don't pay attention to it. Like you can put as much swearing in anything as you want. There's still a rating system, but nobody cares, right? And that's getting worse with things, with social media and stuff. So I think they're going to get better at it, and they're also going to just corrupt society enough that society will just accept that stuff. And so I think you're probably right, even long term.
Well, they have to make great shows if they have great writers, and they don't have great writers right now. They have some good writers, and we know that from season 1 of The Mandalorian. They have great writers available to them, but their push for wokeism is so bad, and because they will get somebody worse than Bob Chapek, it will get really bad. And by the way, as I told you the other night, and this, I do have a point that I'm trying to make with Disney, but going back a little bit with Ron DeSantis, and I told you this a couple days ago, is the most Reagan-like politician I have seen since Ronald Reagan. I haven't seen anybody
style, sure.
in his not only in his governing style, he's fiscally responsible. He has created the largest the largest surplus Florida has ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
He has created unbelievable amounts of jobs because he kept Florida free. He opened up the state. He has gone after wokeism in education, in corporations as much as he can in corporations, but he's gone after all of these things. He is a friend to the environment.
Support, like Reagan got,
and he got almost the full state support. He got all but 3 counties.
Which is how many states did?
No, I'm sorry. 5 counties that he did not get.
Basically the whole state. How many states did Reagan win?
49 in 1984. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very similar, but he's very friendly to the environment. He's very pro environmental restoration of the Everglades, of the Indian River Lagoon system. So these are all issues that are very poignant for Floridians because I'm sorry, real quick. Hold on a second. But because Florida is a water state, it is our number one resource. It's the number one resource that drives our economy and our business in Florida is water. 80% of the population lives on the coast. So water is the resource. Water is the resource because we're the fishing capital of the world, because we are the scuba diving capital of the world, because we have all of these things that happen here. We have the most diverse ecosystem in Florida when it comes to our land and water ecosystem, particularly the Everglades. So we really have so much going for us, and he's a friend to all of that. But like I was saying about him being the closest to Ronald Reagan, because he is young, he's got a really great wife, somebody who is top-notch class. Together, the both of them, they not only look good on camera, right? But they are fairly young, and that's what people are now starting to crave. And that's another reason why they won't go for. Yeah, but it's another reason why they won't go for Trump.
We don't know. We can only presume what his foreign policy ideas are. What's wrong?
Yeah, well, he's been very strong on that. Actually, he's very against going to Ukraine. So anyway, so you have those things, and what I mean by the reason why I bring this up is because if Ron DeSantis became president, you would have a backwards momentum. Where and what I mean by backwards momentum, I mean a restorative momentum.
You mean with the wokeism?
Where things with the wokeism, you change, you roll things back that have been destroying the country because you now have somebody very strong that can do that. The difference is with Disney, it's going to get worse. And I don't think getting Disney a new CEO would not be like getting Ron DeSantis as president, because it's just going to get worse. Asking to have Disney roll back its things and not doing things that they're doing right now is like asking the BSA to stop doing what they're doing with wokeism. And they have lost all kinds of support. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think Disney's done.
Well, I think you're probably right. And it's discouraging. It's discouraging. It goes back to the same thing of the way I felt, with this election. I'm less optimistic than you in the case of Ron DeSantis. Like, you've heard it's a Breitbart, quote that politics is downstream of culture. And the culture, you can roll back the politics. If DeSantis gets in, we'll roll back the politics to an extent. But the culture, that's a tough game. That's tough.
I think you're starting to see extreme polarization on both ends, extreme positions on both sides, and what I mean by extreme on the right, I don't mean that the right is extreme. I think what you are getting is people on the right becoming more conservative.
They're digging in, yeah.
They're digging in their heels, and they're saying, no, this is what's right. We know that allowing children
refusing compromise
to be born is right. We know that abortion is wrong. We know that letting murderers out without bail is wrong. But the Democrats will point to that and say, look how extreme they have become. And Joe Biden keeps doing that. He did it yesterday. And so all of or there's the day before, or the day after the election, is now they're continuing to attack Republicans, but the left is becoming more extreme, way more extreme. And so you get this, we were now getting this extreme tribalism that's happening in the country. We're not getting a coming together or um,
Well, because how
a
can you
rolling
compromise
back.
on those things? I mean, it's such a challenging
No,
thing to compromise
but
on.
but there is hope, and it's because Miami-Dade and Palm Beach and other areas in the state of Florida that always voted blue voted red for Ron DeSantis because they saw
Which I
what
thought
he
was
brought.
indicative of what we were going to see across the nation.
We thought so,
And
but we
boy,
had
howdy, we did
weak.
not.
Boy, well, we
So,
also had weak candidates, and we did have all kinds of issues that still are going on. So
yeah.
I I think that when you do have very, very clear choices, and especially people who can absolutely run on their record, like Ron DeSantis can, you change the narrative. You completely change the narrative. And Ron DeSantis showed that he can that he can turn the Hispanic vote. And in Texas, they have turned the Hispanic vote as well to go with Republicans in some of the districts. And it's really amazing to see those kinds of things happening.
Yeah. Well, I will hold on to just a little bit of hope for that. Um, it's discouraging. I cannot deny the discouragement there, but we'll try and stay positive, and guess we'll see what happens in the next 2 years. So
And the
anyway,
only way Star Wars can be good again is one, Disney no longer has any control over it.
which is
And two,
unlikely. Yeah.
this is weird to say this, or it's actually not weird, but you look at two movies in particular that were really good. And one undoubtedly is Top Gun Maverick, where it was not political. You had clear choice of who the good guys were, and you rooted for them. They were good to root for, and it didn't have wokeism in it at all. And then you have the movie Free Guy. I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah, we
Free
saw Free
Guy.
Guy because I don't
Yeah,
remember
Free Guy
all the
is
details.
so fun. And it's fun because they kept the wokeism out. They made it a choice between good and evil, and it was just a good, well-written movie.
What does that have to
I
do with
think I
Disney,
think
though?
I think well, what I'm saying is that Disney looks at that as an example. If they keep it, they look at those movies as an example and say, we want to do what they did. We want to keep the wokeism out.
Yeah,
We
they
want to
won't do
make sure
that.
that we're making good movies. No, they won't, because they have all these bad writers and they think that it's their mission to make everybody woke.
So one of the other one, I'll add a third option there. So one of the rumors before that I hadn't panned out was that they were going to remove Kathleen Kennedy and put Jon Favreau in charge. That could theoretically mean that we'd get more of the Mandalorian type things in Star Wars and less of the, Kathleen Kennedy inspired wokeism. And so there is a chance there, but who knows, right? Anyway, we'll see. We'll have to see.
Just make good, strong male characters. Quit emasculating men.
Yeah. So anyway, on that note, we are about out of time. So we sure appreciate you joining us today. We don't know if we're going to keep talking politics or not, but we figured right after the election it was a kind of an interesting thing to discuss what happened. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time with more of our music.
Like and subscribe, comment, love us,
Yep.
watch us.
See you later.